Hi. So I want to take a little time to talk about capacity today. I've been thinking about writing about capacity and wasn't exactly sure how to present it because I think it's just so important. It might even be the most important piece of the puzzle with the nervous system work. And so I figured I would just talk about it and bring it to life a little bit rather than try to build an argument around it. And before I get into it, I also just want to say for whoever's listening that everything that I'm doing here on the drop on Substack is basically just throwing noodles at the wall right now because I'm just kind of playing around and seeing which noodles stick and trying different kinds of writing. Some are more kind of argumentative, more structured, and some are more free flow. I have lots of ideas of other things I want to write about, some more personal, some more educational, some a little bit more maybe even provocative or confronting potentially. And then I'm also playing around with weaving in some voice notes and different kinds of practices to just bring some of the work to life a little bit more. So I would love to hear from you if you are engaging with anything that I'm posting. I'd love to hear what is resonating with you, if there's a particular topic or a particular post, anything you want more or less of. I'd love to hear any and all feedback as I kind of continue experimenting here. I'm enjoying it for now. I feel like I have a lot of energy currently for expression and writing. So I'm just kind of following wherever the energy is right now and enjoying the process. So let's get into capacity a little bit more. Completely riffing here, but I feel like I have a lot to say about this topic. Let me start by defining it. Capacity in nervous system terms is like the load that you can bear in your system. So it's physiological. It's in your nervous system. You can think of it like your window of tolerance, if you're familiar with that framework or visual. It's basically how much you can handle at any given moment. When you get to the edge of your window of tolerance, or the kind of the limits of your capacity, is when you're going over the edge into overwhelm, into survival mode, and into dysregulation. But within your capacity or your window of tolerance, you're able to stay connected to yourself. You're able to stay present, even if there might be a little bit of activation or there might be a little bit of stress. You can handle it and you're not going to lose yourself. And we can work with our capacity. We can intentionally shape it to increase our capacity and to widen our window of tolerance, which is what a lot of the nervous system work is really teaching us to do, because there are so many misunderstandings. One of the big ones is that capacity is a mindset issue. It's about willpower or discipline, or you just need more motivation, or you need more drive, or you need to work harder or push through. That is the opposite. All of that will bring your capacity down. Capacity is physiological in your nervous system. It has to do with your ability to self-regulate effectively. But because we live in a society that is so centered, that puts such a premium on the mind and on thinking and on cognizance, that we are living very disembodied lives. We're getting stuck in our mind and disconnected from our body, which is where our nervous system is, and where our intuition is, and our wisdom is. And I'm not going to get all the way into the neuroscience or the vagus nerve right now, but the vagus nerve is the longest nerve in our body. It starts at the brainstem. There's a branch of it that goes up into our face, and then there's another branch of it that goes down through the lungs and into the gut, touches all of our sensory organs, and 80% of the vagus nerve is afferent, meaning it's taking information bottom up from the body to the brain. only 20% of it is efferent, where it's regulating back down brain to body. And so that gives you a sense of the fact that we biologically are bottom-up beings. Most of our intelligence is in our body, 80% of it. Only 20% is coming top down, and that 20% is actually, it's receiving the input from the body and responding to it and adjusting and re-regulating and recalibrating in response to what the body is communicating up to the brain, what's happening internally, externally, and relationally. And so we are, again, biologically bottom up, but our society is very much top down. And so we get disconnected from 80% of who we are and the wisdom that we could access. We get disconnected from it, and we're trying to like run with this 20% in the brain anyway. So there's a lot of misnomers about capacity, and that's one of the big ones, is that you just need to work harder, do more, what's wrong with you, like why aren't you disciplined enough? Or I hear that in coaching and can't tell you how many times I hear it constantly from people. Oh, I'm just not consistent, or I just don't have discipline, or I don't follow through. I hear that all the time, and that's just a cue to me, like you're dysregulated. That's what's going on. Let's work with your nervous system, and then we can focus on some habit change too if you want. But it's not because there's something wrong with your ability to follow through. Typically, it might be that because you're burning out and you're exhausted and you're out of energy. But in any case, so capacity, things that, okay, where do I want to start here? There are things that can increase our capacity, and there are many things that will degrade or, decrease our capacity. The nervous system is built to be flexible and be resilient and to move in and out of all the states, right? It's not about you have to stay calm and regulated all the time. That's not possible, and that's not the aim. We want to be flexibly able, we want to be responsive. We want to get mobilized sometimes into action with the fight or flight. That's what helps us get things done. That's what helps us be productive. That's where our passion is. We also want to be able to recover and come back down out of that. What happens in our society with most people is that they lose the ability to come back down. And so they're living in constant activation and mobilization, which is also known as chronic stress, which over time will lead to burnout because it's not sustainable. And so you need to be able to go up and then come back down and recover. And when you have that resilience, that flexibility in your system to be able to come down and recover, then you can go up again and go up higher and do more and be more effective and more potent and more precise. And then you come back down again, and it's the same thing. It's a learning process. Your brain has to have the recovery. Your nervous system has to have the recovery in order to be sustainable, in order to be continuously learning and growing, and in order to be effective at what you're doing. And so you're not just going through the motions or running on autopilot, but you're actually like improving. And that's where we get a lot of our sense of meaning. So we want that. And another thing to mention here is that stress also gets a really bad name, but stress in and of itself is not a bad thing. It's adaptive. Chronic stress, where we're stuck there, not coming out of it, can't recover, that's not good at all. It's very bad for our mental health and physical health, and it's not sustainable. But a stressor is something that pushes us a little bit beyond our current comfort zone and into the growth zone or the learning zone. And it's something that gives us like a charge or some energy, like a burst, right? To do something. And a lot of times we feel that we feel what we would call stress in our body because it's something that is meaningful to us. We don't feel stressed about things that are not meaningful to us. And so that's just another reframe here too. So recovery is very, very, very important. We need to go up and we need to come down and recover. A lot of people lose that ability, that off switch. It's called the vagal brake in the nervous system work. It atrophies and people actually can't access it. And so then they have a really hard time with rest and with settling down. And even when they're lying in bed, their minds are going a million miles a minute. Their body's really active and they can't sleep. That's because there's insufficient vagal tone or insufficient recovery. So things that help increase capacity, recovery is the biggest one, and making sure that you don't lose the ability to come back down into recovery, or that you're making sure that you're not judging it or diminishing it as being unimportant. Like, I need to just push through and do more, and I don't have to pee right now. I'm not going to get up. I'm just going to keep going. That's no good. That's you need to stop and pee. You need to get some water. You need to eat. You need to get outside and get some fresh air. You need to stop every once in a while. You need to take those mini breaks, take pauses in between tasks, take a couple of breaths, close out some of the tabs, do less at a time. Be mindful of how much multitasking you're doing and how much urgency you're allowing to run through your body and drive you all day long. How much stress, how much load is in your system when maybe it doesn't need to be. These are just all examples of things that are really normalized in our culture, but that chip away at our physiological nervous system capacity. Okay, so I think that's sufficient groundwork. Hopefully I didn't miss anything too important there. But I want to bring it to life a little bit now. So why is this important? Why should we care? And how does this show up, in maybe some more tangible real life examples? So you can imagine that you are in some sort of a conflict with somebody, right? Like, somebody said something that triggered you, and then you have this flood of activation in your body. Somebody with more capacity is going to feel that and allow it to kind of be there and move through them without losing connection to themselves, so that they can respond instead of react, and so that they can stay present even though there is some activation there. They're not losing themselves in that. Someone else who has less capacity, that same trigger could happen, and that flood of activation, we all know what that feels like, comes through the body. It feels very uncomfortable. It feels like the alarm bells are all ringing, like there's an emergency happening, and that person instantly reacts. Maybe there's an anger outburst. Maybe they say something that they later regret. Maybe they throw something. Or they shut everything down and walk out, right? They can't handle it. They can't stay in the room. They can't stay in their body. They cannot stay connected to themselves long enough for the activation to be metabolized and move through, long enough for whatever happened to be resolved. So there's a lack of resolution, which is when we're able to effectively self-regulate. There's resolution. The stress response cycle completes. There's a natural discharge of that activation, which is cortisol and adrenaline moving through the body. We feel the activation, but it's stress hormones that are getting released by the brain, cascading through the body. Those are naturally discharged, and then our system comes back down. And when that happens, there's not a backlog of those stress hormones just like festering in our system for years or decades or lifetimes. It's being moved all the way through and out. But if you're not able to be with it long enough for that naturally to happen, it doesn't get discharged, it gets stuck. And if you're somebody who's like just in that kind of pattern, every time you get triggered, the backlog grows, and that shrinks your window of tolerance and brings your capacity down. So it's just ever shrinking. And so the triggers are getting activated more quickly, and your reactions are more impulsive, and you have less and less and less connection to yourself and to the moment. Whereas somebody who's actively learning how to self-regulate and stay with and be with and allow the activation to move through, their capacity is increasing. Their window of tolerance is widening. They're able to stay with more and be with more and respond more effectively. So that's kind of the difference of what it looks like and feels like. And I'm sure everyone listening to this knows what it feels like to be triggered and to not always feel like you have the self-control or the wherewithal to be able to handle it well. And especially if you're under a lot of stress or you already had a bad day, there's just a lot of other hard things going on, right? Those things are all shrinking down your capacity. And so there really can be this compounding effect. And sometimes that's just the way it is with life, right? We can't control all the circumstances of life and all the weather of life, but we can control a lot more than we might realize by doing these kind of intentional small things and being more of an active operator of our nervous system rather than just a passive, like things happen to me and there's nothing I can do about it and this is just the way I am and it's fixed and I'm rigid and there's something wrong with me and there's nothing I can do. That's not true. None of that is true. We can get stuck thinking that because maybe we don't have evidence of any other way of responding, but we can learn. And when we learn to work with our capacity, we have more capacity also for learning and for growth and for teaching our nervous system, new ways of being and collecting evidence for those new ways of being, so that over time we change our story and we change the way we move through the world, the way we relate to ourselves, the way we relate to others, the way we're able to stay connected to ourselves and to our values and stay present with the people we love. Because if you think about it, the people who trigger you the most are also the people who you love the most, right? And so you want to be able to stay. You want to be able to find resolution. It doesn't mean it's easy. It's not. It's not easy. Even if you get really skillful at it, it's still not easy. It's still uncomfortable. But you get used to it, and it just becomes this like new muscle memory that you develop. Anyway, I think that's probably plenty. There's a lot more somatic tools and practices that you can also learn that will help you work with your nervous system more intentionally and effectively. I'm not going to get into all of those now, but I wanted to at least kind of explain at a high level what capacity is, because I talk about it all the time in my writing, and I'm going to continue to talk about it because it's so important and integral to this work. And I've been thinking, I need to write about it, because where people get stuck is in the gap between understanding something in the mind. Again, the culture is obsessed with the mind, and the mind being the king. But then people don't know how to change their behavior. They don't know how to actualize it. They don't know how to live it. And they get stuck in that gap. And that gap is capacity. So if you have narrow capacity, or if you have a wider capacity, that's going to impact your ability to actually change your behavior so that you are able to understand something and do it, not just the former. So yeah, I think that's enough. Feel free to ask any questions. I would love to hear them, or comments, or anything that you learned or that stood out to you, that was interesting or helpful, anything you want more of. Keep the feedback coming. And thanks for listening, and I'll see you soon. Okay, I thought of one more thing that I forgot to mention, so I'm just going to add this in. Defensiveness. That's what happens when you're kind of at max capacity, right? You might feel really defensive, and it's something all of us experience. Some of us get to it quicker than others, but we can all relate to what that feels like, to just be like, get off me. I can't deal with this. What you're saying, isn't true, or I can't handle it, or whatever. When you have less capacity, you're more defensive. When you have more capacity, you're less defensive. And then at the very end, when I was talking about behavior change and getting stuck in that gap between understanding and actually being able to change your behavior, live something that you understand, defensiveness is going to be a big obstacle for you. If you are really defensive about like the way you are, or why you are the way that you are, or maybe you get really defensive around like, you know, thinking you're not good enough is a pretty common one. And then that blocks you from changing because now you're in shame. Whereas if you have more capacity, that means the defensiveness is not going to get activated as soon or as intensely. And so it's not going to block you from laying these new bricks towards behavior change and habit change in the same way it would with somebody who's very defensive, because they don't have the capacity to change. In order to be able to change your behavior, this is like such an important piece of the puzzle actually, you have to have capacity, because it's hard because you're rewiring everything that's already set and already kind of like automated in your nervous system and the way that you know yourself to be and the way that you operate in the world without having to think about it. Changing behavior requires so much intentionality and energy and patience and these small steps, one brick at a time, to learn new ways of being in the world, because you actually are rewiring your brain and your nervous system. And you need capacity in order to be able to do that, because it's energy intensive and because it's difficult. And so if you're running into a wall of defensiveness, you're not going to have sufficient capacity to change your behavior. And I think that's one of the main reasons why a lot of people can understand something all the way up and down, have great insights, excellent self-awareness, an ability to go all the way down into the rabbit hole until they understand something fully, but cannot actualize it, because they don't have enough capacity in their nervous system to change their behavior. Okay, I think that's where I'll leave it, but I wanted to add that piece in as well.